I think this is the first time I have ever made any reference to cooking. Certainly, it's the first time I've ever drawn an illustration from food preparation, but it came to mind, so here goes. In today's current lingo, I have been noticing how often people refer to being fed in a spiritual sense. They might talk about a Bible study and say, I go every week, and it feeds me. In other words, in that instance, the Word is their soul food. And so I was curious about that expression, soul food. What is it exactly? How is it defined? What was the derivation of that term? And when I looked it up, what I learned is that the term had its roots during the days of slavery, when African Americans had to make do with whatever food was available to them and the crops that were grown. They used what was on hand: cornmeal, collard greens, and beans. And the food, albeit not fancy, was enough. And because it was enough, it filled them both body and soul. And that's why that particular kind of food came to be known as soul food. It is my conviction that even today, whenever we are willing to use what we've got for the sake of a cause greater than ourselves, that Christ in return still supplies us with soul food. In John's text today, Jesus and his disciples were spent. The crowds kept growing in size, and the disciples were hounded by them. The people wanted to be relieved of their pain, and at this point, Jesus was the answer to whatever ailed them. And so, at Jesus' suggestion, the disciples decide to take a break. It's time. So, they get in a boat to cross over to the other side of the lake. And then, after that, this shows us how much they wanted to be rid of the crowds for a while. They climb a mountain. But this crowd has it all figured out. They rush over and they greet them right there. And note Jesus' response when he discovers they've caught up with him. He doesn't get angry. He does not complain. Instead, he asks one question of the disciples: how they can feed these followers. And Phillip, the realist, is appalled. I'm sure he's thinking, this is a great break for us. They're hungry. Send them home. And in response, he says, what? 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. What are you thinking? And at this point, Philip probably assumes that his spot-on practicality has put the matter to rest. Don't you love to have Philips around you? They're smart, and they know what they're talking about. And when you think you have to do something big, they say, nah, don't worry about that. That's not your problem. You know what I'm talking about. You get an urge, a spurt of altruism rushes into your soul, and you decide right then and there that, yes, you are going to do something to help a cause. It's a cause you truly care about. But just then, someone whom I will call Philip says, well, you know, you're not going to make that much of a difference. You're not going to be able to solve the problem, so why bother? Philip, smart Philip, sizes up the whole situation and concludes that since not one person can possibly solve the problem, don't even bother going there. Phillips can always be counted on to get you off the hook. Then, secondly, there's also Andrew. Andrew is also nice to have around because he's always looking for someone else to supply the solutions. Shamelessly, Andrew is really good at passing the buck. Did you notice in this text he says there's a boy over there. He has loaves and fishes. Why can't he share? After all, it's not our responsibility to feed these people. Both Phillip and Andrew were looking at the big picture. They were fully aware of the enormity of the situation, and their remedy was, don't do a thing. But by the grace of God, there was in that crowd a boy, not prominent enough to be cited by name, but still big enough to be noticed. And unlike Philip or Andrew, he refused to allow practical matters to get into his way. And all that little boy did was to simply look at his own hands and decide, yes, I want to offer Jesus all I have. Barley loaves and fish, nothing more. And then there, in the presence of 5,000 people, Jesus multiplies them until there's food enough for everyone, even with fragments left over. The message of today is that the little that you have, as you look at your hands now, the message is that if you give it all to Christ, it's going to be enough. It will become soul food for all who want to partake. That's what the 12 of us discovered in Guatemala 2 weeks ago. None of us went assuming we were going to solve any major problems. We did not go with a full deck. Collectively, we spoke very little Spanish. As a group, we arrived with some brawn, but not a whole lot. Our medical know-how as a unit was almost non-existent. Sue was the exception. And as a team, well, might anyone have asked, and I'm including Philip and Andrew here, now what exactly do you think you can offer? Yet, like the boy, we gave the best that we had. And we discovered that it was, in fact, more than enough. Some gave of their energy on the soccer field. No small gift, particularly given the humidity. Others offered the Guatemalan children the use of their cameras. They loved taking pictures of us and each other. Some hauled wheelbarrows, loaded with or without extra riders. Still others went to homes to install new water filters. Bottom line, in some we offered hearts that were ready to be filled. And that was enough. We put what we had out there. And this is what they gave back to us. They gave us unqualified acceptance, whether we had ever been to Guatemala before or not, whether we spoke Spanish or whether we didn't, whether we were young or whether we were old. We were there for them, they knew it, and that was what mattered. Secondly, they gave us a rare and diminishing commodity these days. They gave us the gift of their trust. What more prized possession did the parents have than their children? Yet they fully entrusted them to our care. What a gift it is to be trusted by total strangers. And finally, the children, the people in Guatemala, allowed us the opportunity to replace our soul's mirrors with windows, which allowed us to see for ourselves what they don't have, and we do, things like the ability to read and to drink clean water, and things that they have and we don't. For example, more hours in a day. We can't explain it, but the clock stopped. We had much more time than we've had in a long, long while. Another thing they gave to us was much less evidence of anger and irritation. In teaching the Bible story of David and Goliath, I picked an unusually tall boy, at least by Guatemalan standards. He was huge, to be Goliath. And I was coaching him to enact this scene with little David, who dared to challenge him. And so I told this Goliath to act angry. I said, okay, there's a little boy. He's challenging you with a little stone. I want you to be angry. Go, huh, huh, huh. Walk like that. And he said back to me in Spanish, I can't. And I thought he was going to say, I can't act. He said, I can't because I don't have any anger inside of me. How many of us can say that? As a result of our time there, 4 more sponsored children have been added to our wider church family. 4 more. For $30 a month, 4 more children will receive free medical care, not only for themselves, but for their families. Their school tuition will be completely paid. They'll be given food, shoes, school supplies, and the money will provide them with nutritional supplements. And if you don't think it makes a difference, you can look at the children. You can tell on sight who is a recipient and who isn't. We went to Guatemala giving what we had, and Christ gave back in full. The message of this morning is that each of us is made up of a composite of people. We, each one of us, have someone within us named Phillip, whom, if we rely on him, we can count on to tell us that problems are way too big to do anything about. Each one of us houses an Andrew, who is ready on the get-go to tell us who should solve the problem, the government or somebody else who's got money, anyone else but ourselves. But the good news, the wonderful news of this text this morning, is that every single one of us has within us a nameless little boy who is ready right now to give what he's got to Jesus Christ. That's all it takes. If we simply look at our own hands and offer what's there to him, it will be amazing to watch the miracles happen with plenty of soul food to spare. I did 2 weeks ago. I saw it with my own eyes. Amen and amen.